How do you talk about a band that truly feels, at least for our genre, to be immortal? I mean, we talked about Black Sabbath, but that's a history all of its own. We're talking about a band that will be going on 40 years here in a couple of years and has produced now their 20th or 21st album. They're getting up there. Not to mention also the fact that they have basically done the same style of music throughout the entirety of their career, basically because it's what they find to be the most fun and what they're the best at. Now, whenever you have a band and you know what you're the best at and what you have the most fun doing, wouldn't that be what you wanted to do over and over again? Well, yeah, of course. Of course, we usually here on the coverkillernation channel and other very much more harsh critics tend to look a lot for musical evolution. They tend to look to see whenever these bands take those leaps and bounds. But it's Motorhead. Does Motorhead really need to do that? If they were going to do that, this would have been something that would have happened in the 1980s, whenever they were about 7 or 8 albums in. But instead, here we are in 2013. They're more than 20 albums in with their career with the release of Aftershock here in 2013, and there's absolutely no need for them really to change. Absolutely not. They can still pump out 14 great tracks of just dirty, just depraved, death and roll or rock and roll, whatever you really want to call it, metal and roll, and it just sounds great. It has that crusty punk influence to it. It has that new wave of British heavy metal sound still laced all the way through it, considering these guys are considered to be one of the earliest members of that class, considering they came out of London, England. Not to mention, this is another one of those bands that, for all of their immortality, you could see them in pop culture all the time. You could see them still within your community sometimes, just in the people that you meet. I think of 2 particular moments in the 1990s that really, for me, just speaks to Motorhead directly. The first being Little Nicky. Remember the 2 metalheads, the 2 metal fans in Little Nicky? For some reason, Motorhead is just all over that. Especially, I think, because of the leather jean jacket that the one guy had, and his voice and everything like that. If you slapped a mole on that motherfucker, basically you'd have Lemmy Kilmister. Same thing could be true about Con Air, the gentleman who flew the plane, who I believe his nickname was Swamp Rat or Swamp Thing or Swamp Man. That guy basically spells Lemmy all the way down to the mole. Only, not quite. But damn. So how do you talk about a band like this? How do you really approach this? Well, it's simple. It's simple. The way in which you approach a band like this is by talking about the history, by talking about the fact that Motorhead has had hits, that Motorhead has gotten a dedicated fan base in the metal department, basically because they've helped revitalize the genre in the 1970s, which was something that was starting to happen, especially in the England area. However, as it migrated over in the 1980s, Motorhead got cited as a principal influence for a lot of speed metal, for a lot of thrash metal, and we know, of course, how things evolved from there. This album right here, while it's not going to necessarily be anything all of that drastically different compared to The World Is Yours, their last album from 2010, or anything really previous to this, you have to look at this and examine it and see that it is a good slab of that new wave of British heavy metal, mixed with some rock and roll, and even mixed with a little bit of the blues. And we know that the blues is a foundation of all of this. We understand that. We accept that, mainly because the blues are awesome. Listen to a song such as Dust and Glass, and you're going to notice that almost immediately. Think about songs such as Lost Woman Blues. Blues is right there in the title, and you can hear it in the musical construction. Consider songs such as the opener Heartbreaker, Coupe de Grace, consider Going to Mexico, Silence When You Speak to Me, and you immediately see where the riff has really gotten a powerful, powerful shine here, as they do in each Motorhead affair. The riff has a very principal meaning. It's something that has always been a prominent part of the new wave of British heavy metal idea. Great grooves, great writing. It may not necessarily always be the most diverse, but ladies and gentlemen, sometimes simpler is better. Sometimes you don't need a lot in order to truly have something great. Because whenever you listen to this and you listen to, say, the three-chord bands from the latter part of the 90s and the first part of the 2000s in the alternative rock realm, you'll notice immediately why Motorhead has a legendary appeal, and those bands are just going to be kind of bands of the moment. You'll notice immediately that Motorhead has a lot more to offer as far as the musical front is concerned, and it has a lot more fun to offer, whereas those in the 3-chord department just had a lot of despair, a lot of anger, a lot of rage. There's not a lot of fun that's really in there unless you really like to fuck shit up, which a lot of people, I think, in this generation do. So I guess they can destroy their rooms and then rebuild them, and that would be fun to them. But this is a good album. Basically, if you listen to anything that Motorhead has done, you can conclude that there's solidarity to it. There are some albums, certain albums from the 1980s, 90s, whatever, that you could probably conclude are better than others. There are some that perhaps have more solid songwriting, more songs that definitely make you feel a certain way, that definitely kind of make you bob your head and want to thrash around a little bit more than others. But with 20 albums worth of material plus, that's going to happen. Motorhead is one of those bands that you should respect regardless of your actual opinion of the band. Principally because without them, music, and especially heavy metal, would look very, very different these days. I know that a lot of people would probably look at me and say, well, you know what? I listen to deathcore. I listen to black metal. I listen to this. I listen to that. How did it affect me? It seems like it only affected speed and thrash metal. Well, think about deathcore. It's come 20 years after speed and thrash. What if speed and thrash wasn't there? What if Pantera wasn't there? What if hardcore wasn't there? Think about black metal. Think about extremes. Think about how the extremes had to be originally pushed and tested by a band that was not really pushing extremes, at least to us, but for the time, they were. The influence is there. This is an album that's almost like a reminder. And every Motorhead album is almost like a reminder. It's a reminder for each and every one of us to look at this band and say thank you. And it's also their reminder to us that it doesn't matter how old they are. It doesn't matter how many albums that they've put out. And it doesn't matter if Lemmy's mole takes up his entire face. They're always going to kick ass. And they're still here. And they don't plan to be going anywhere anytime soon. So check this album out.